We have to start pushing the left in a lot of ways, and that's one thing that I'm trying my best to do, is to start making connections between what's happening in America, because I think a lot of the left in America is so US focused and so
Oh, yeah.
US centric, and a lot of people believe that they're a leftist because they support Medicare for all.
Right.
So,
Right.
I'm sorry.
Which is a good thing to support.
It's
But
a good,
also,
sorry.
yeah.
I'm not downplaying it. Like,
Yeah,
yes,
yeah, yeah.
that's great.
But also, how do we call, not that this is so corny, but also how do we do it in a way that's not like chiding? You know what I mean? Because then we lose people, and it's not on you to be that diplomatic voice.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
you
yeah.
can vent, but then some other people have to be like, guys, let's look at these other countries and stuff. Yeah.
It's just so vital to connect the struggles of Black and Brown people in America to the struggles of Black and Brown people around the world, right? Because we've been colonized by, by Europeans, by Westerners, our entire existence. So it's important to really understand, like, okay, like, what's happening in other countries, right? And I also, like, there have been successful leftist socialist movements around the world that we need to learn from.
Yeah.
Right. I was talking about, I think I was talking, maybe I mentioned Bolivia or not, but Evo Morales and the Mass Party literally fought back.
Just a movement towards socialism is what it stands for. It's not like
Yes.
MASS. Yeah, just so people know. Yeah.
Yeah, the MAS party, Movement Towards Socialism, Movimiento al Socialismo. They literally fought back U.S. imperialism. They stopped a U.S.-backed coup in its tracks, right? Like, that's freaking incredible, and we need to be looking at that and gaining inspiration for ourselves here in America, right? Because yes,
and
we
the
do.
U.S. media. Sorry, just really quickly before the U.S. media portrayed the coup as a legitimate election, and leaned into the trope of the corrupt leftist guy. Sorry, but keep going. Yeah.
Right, exactly. And that's just one example, right? But there was a massive general strike, like the largest strike in history that happened in India. How was that able, how did they do it? Right? There's just, we in the US, we need to be looking at what's happening around the world. There have been successful socialist movements and advancement towards socialism around the world, and we need to look at them for inspiration, right? Because here in the US, like, we need to see that a lot of these movements were successful because of organized labor, right? So it was the miners in Bolivia who just said, we're not going to do anything. We're going to stop right now. Right, the same thing in India with the farmers out there, right? It's the labor, it's the working class who are able to, fight back capitalism, imperialism, and, like, we need to study that because we have an extremely weak labor movement in America. I think like maybe 12 to 16% of people are in unions in the United States, which is abysmal.
And unions are an arm of the Democratic Party by now, most of them.
Exactly. And a lot of the leadership of the major national unions are in the pockets of, the Democrats for the most part. And sometimes, a lot of the rank and file get ignored by leadership, but that's a whole nother story.
I meant the leadership. Yeah.
Yeah. So I want my message to those on the left in America is pay attention to what's happening around the world. Let's learn from them. Let's study, what tactics did they use? How did they organize workers in order to, achieve these feats? And we need to do the same here, right? Because as Sean Michael was saying, revolution is almost a science, like but you have to like look to others. I mean, yes, we're gonna have to, look at without getting too theoretical, we have to look at the material conditions here in America. Things aren't going to be exactly, apples to apples, but we need to look at like fundamentally what tactics and approach that they use to gain power. And in the left, I think we're not only not looking enough to the outside world for inspiration, but we're also not focused on getting power. We need to get power. We need to take power away from the establishment. And it's just like, when are we going to be ready to do that? When are we going to be ready to put our money where our mouth is, because all we hear on the left is talk, 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 talk. Or those who think that they're on the left talk, 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 talk. When are we actually going to start doing and fighting and challenging established power, entrenched power?
Media needs to play a big part in changing the narrative of how we look at what we call the far left, and understanding that the Democratic Party isn't a leftist party. There should be a move to develop a strong third and fourth party that will actually create the revolutionary space that we need to create the change in this nation. And the next thing is also making sure that we educate people on the harms of this country as well. So there's a lot of people who are comfortable with some of the violence that happens across this nation. They can see a Black man get murdered, and in a few after a couple news cycles, they can forget about it, or they're paying attention to something else when that family is still having to deal with it. Karan Hilton's mom, for example, Miss Karen, still is missing her son. Right? We've had so many Black and brown people killed since we were chanting out Breonna Taylor's name in the streets, since we were chanting out George Floyd's name, and we still don't have justice for them. Honestly, we should still be in the streets today because we still don't have justice. But because of the conditions of our news cycles, people have just thought, okay, it's time to move on. I think we should lose that privilege of moving on from an issue that has done so much harm. And once we move into that space in this country, we'll finally start making some change.
Yeah, and one other thing, Brad said in the comments somewhere, he was saying that, I don't know, he was saying that just because it was a failed coup, being from somewhere with real coup doesn't change that. Just like getting hit by a spouse's abuse, even if your spouse isn't like Turner. But Brad, I will push back on that and say it's like if someone gets a punch on the face and the whole time they were ignoring or funding someone who killed someone else. All right, I'm losing the analogy, but I think the analogy is this is part of it, is that the same people calling this a coup are people who either ignore or vote to fund the coup that actually overthrow entire governments and states. And so while I'm not saying we should downplay it, and I do think, honestly, I think an attempted coup you have to try to infiltrate the armed forces. So for me, that's one, and they didn't try to do that. I'm not saying, look, I think, and Max was talking about this, and someone needs to, there needs to be an investigation.
They didn't have a plan. They didn't. What were they in there to do? They went in there recklessly and without a plan. Like, what was their strategy? They had none.
There was, we do have to look at the top down where the hell everyone was when this happened, because again, it's inconsistent with the way security usually is. But yeah, so that's my that is, I think, what is frustrating for people, especially when they're from countries that I was born and raised here, but I'm not speaking for people from other countries, but I think it's probably infuriating to see, again, the same people who won't call the coups in your country that legit overturn. Like, look what happened in Honduras, and Obama and Hillary wouldn't call it a coup. And they lied about it too.